Hi guys, welcome back to Swordwind. We are the Charlotte branch of the New York Historical Fencing Association, and in this video we're going to be talking about another kind of Pell, a type of hanging Pell. As we said before, a Pell is anything that you can use as a target. What I have next to me here is a tennis ball on a bit of string that I've just hung up over a branch on this tree in my backyard, and this is my hanging Pell. So there are a couple of exercises you can do with a hanging Pell that are, it's a cheap tool, it's an important tool, so let's get to it. The first thing that you can use a hanging Pell for is just thrusting practice. And what you're going for, there's a couple of reasons we want to be using a target this small. Obviously, a tennis ball is smaller than a fencing mask. It's even smaller than an unarmored human head. But we're using a small target to practice targeting efficiency. So we don't want to be hitting. We don't want to be able to only hit a target the size of a fencing mask or even the size of a human face. We want to be able to push ourselves to be able to thrust smaller and smaller targets so that we develop the skill of putting our point exactly where we want to put it and not in the general area that we want to put it. Particularly when things get chaotic in a fight, that can be important. It's surprisingly easy, even with giant fencing helmets on our heads, to thrust at somebody and realize that you've just missed their head. I've certainly done that in competition. If you're watching this and you've ever competed, you probably have too. People much better than me have done this in competition, and I've seen them do it. In fact, a tennis ball is not even the smallest target that you can go for. Once you can hit a tennis ball reliably from any position, you might want to move down to a ping pong ball. If you can do that reliably, you might want to push yourself to move down to something smaller. In terms of how exactly you practice your thrusts, there's a couple of things that you want to bear in mind to keep yourself honest. First is, you don't want to just brush the target like I just did. That's, obviously that would get into somebody's face if this were my target, but in order to keep myself honest, I want to make sure that when I hit this thing, I get a nice, good, solid hit. You really want to send it flying in the same way that, making a cut without a proper tachikaze isn't really a cut. You're just moving your sword in a mostly good enough fashion. When you're doing this kind of solo practice, there is no reason that you should settle yourself for mostly good enough. So make sure that you make really solid contact with that ball, that you actually send it flying. And then, in terms of the sorts of exercises you can do, especially if you are just kind of starting off with thrusting practice, you can just hang out. You can hang out here in long point and just, can I move my sword enough to contact the target? But you can then move on to thrusting from other positions. You can thrust from out of distance with different kinds of footwork, whether it's a lunge or taking a passing step. You can stop the ball moving around if you want to. You can also just leave it kind of moving and twirling. That adds a little bit of extra difficulty to the exercise. Then, once you can do those things fairly reliably, you want to push yourself to thrust in ways that are closer to the way that you would thrust in an actual fight. So, while you may find yourself, for instance, up here in left ox and have an opportunity to just rush forward and stab your opponent straight on, much more frequently you'll have to do that from some sort of wind. So I'll start back here, for instance, in right flug, wind up, and then can I thrust in one smooth motion? I did not rehearse this before shooting this video. As you can see, this is more difficult. This is a more difficult exercise. The kind of building up to the sorts of thrusts that you would make in a fight is the ultimate goal of kind of just tennis ball thrusting. And that's true no matter what kind of fencing you're doing. If it's longsword, then there's probably going to be a lot of kind of cross-body thrusts into mimicking absetsen. If you're doing Bolognese side sword, then you'll have your descending thrusts, your straight thrusts, your backhanded punta reversi, which I have also not rehearsed before shooting this video. Whatever sort of thrust is appropriate for your art, push yourself to work up to being able to do that on a small target. The other thing you can do with a hanging Pell, or with a solid hanging Pell like this, is practice cuts, but you run into that problem. The advantage to this sort of thing is that your hanging Pell will let your sword pass through. The disadvantage, aside from your rigging getting messed up, is that if you strike a nice solid hit, you might wrap the whole thing up, even if you didn't hit the suspension string. So while this can be helpful in that you have a physical object like a standing Pell that you can aim for, that you can tell if you hit, you can set it at different heights, as long as you don't mind and unlike a standing Pell, it doesn't stop your sword mid-swing, so that you can actually finish your swing like you would through an actual target, and then kind of see the entire swing. I personally find that to be somewhat more of a hassle than it's worth, but it is a way that you can get some extra mileage out of a solid hanging Pell like this. I hope that this has been useful for you guys, and we'll see you next week with another video.